We're back here, the whole 9 yards on a Monday evening. Brandon, how's it going?
It's good. Everything. How about you?
Pretty good. How's home? How was Easter?
Yeah. No, it was good. As you could see, obviously I'm home. But yeah, no, everything was good. And I'll be back for the next time for episodes. So I'll be back on campus.
Yeah, I stayed on campus actually. I was at your dorm last night. I was with Nate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were just chilling. We were watching a bit of the Angels White Sox game. We didn't see Otani hit the home run, but I mean, just quickly, he started yesterday. He threw. I only watched like I saw maybe like the first four innings. But he looked amazing. I mean, he was throwing 100 on his fastballs, and the first pitch, and I think it was in the first inning, he had a 450-foot bomb. It was insane, and it made me think that Otani. I mean, I kind of knew this anyways, but if Otani just stays healthy, he's going to be such an exciting player to watch, and he's definitely getting overhyped just because he's somebody that can hit and pitch, so he might be getting a little bit more hype and press than maybe he deserves. But yeah, if he can stay healthy, I mean, it's not gonna be like a just a Mike Trout lineup anymore. And I guess you have Rendon too, but at least
Yeah.
like it was in the past decade, basically. But we'll get into the national championship. Gonzaga Baylor, the most popular picked matchup. I want to say something like 16 or 17% of the at least the ESPN brackets had Gonzaga Baylor
Yeah.
as the final matchup. So it's definitely the one that people knew was coming or predicted the most. It's not too surprising to me. I mean, Gonzaga clearly has been the best team, and I know I didn't predict them, but just it plain their record is better than anybody else's right now. So and they're undefeated. And if they were to win, I think to be the first undefeated team in college basketball history or since.
Since Indiana, 1976.
Okay, yeah. So basically, it's since forever.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, what were your reactions? Gonzaga Baylor. Obviously, you got the matchup. You predicted it correctly. And then, what were your reactions from? I guess we'll talk about Gonzaga UCLA first, if you want to talk about the Final Four matchups as well.
Yeah, I guess just like quickly, just because the game was a blowout the entire time, the Baylor Houston game. I mean, I kind of expected it to be like that. I wasn't really thinking that was going to be that close of a game. And they were up, I think, 20 the entire game. You get in the first half, that game was over, but yeah, I think most people expected that. But the Gonzaga UCLA game, that was close throughout. I mean, Gonzaga was trailing most of the first half. I think they trailed in 10 minutes of the first half, and that was all they trailed in the rest of the tournament combined. So that was clear. This is clearly their toughest matchup of the tournament so far. Probably by the most least expected team, I guess, since the first round, obviously. And yeah, I mean, it was a great game. The ending. I mean, at the end of regulation, you had the charge call, which it was a charge. I think some people were saying that they thought it was a block or it should have been a no call. I think it was clearly a charge. He was not in the restricted area and he wasn't moving. So I didn't really understand that. But that was the end of regulation. And then you had overtime where you had big shot after big shot. Timmy, I think he had the first 6 points coming out of overtime. Then you had Juzang I think he had maybe 6 points also in overtime, but he had the big basket at the end to tie the game. And then you obviously had Suggs hit the half court shot from three to win the game. So yeah, I mean, it was a great game. Probably the best game in the last 5 years, probably since the Villanova UNC championship game in 2016. At least like in terms of just back and forth, great shot after great shot, and then obviously a buzzer beater to win. So yeah, it was an overall great game. Gonzaga definitely didn't play their best game, but there's a reason they're 31-0 is because they can win games like that. So yeah, it was definitely a great game though.
Yeah, it's one of the most exciting college basketball games I've watched since. Yeah, you're probably right. At least probably like 2016 ish. And my biggest takeaway from that game was basically it's the first time, at least in the tournament, that Gonzaga has looked immortal. It's the first game that I was, questioning their win. I was like, are they actually going to win this game? I'm not sure. And um, once he hit the layup to tie the game at 90, I was thinking, wow, like Gonzaga might actually, lose the game potentially. But obviously, Suggs, I mean, lucky or not, it was an amazing shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it doesn't affect his draft stock. Not that that's super related, but I mean, he's going to be a top 4 or 5 pick. Honestly, he's going to be top four or
Top
five. He
five.
might even rise a little bit more than that. But yeah, it was an amazing game. The championship game. I mean, I'm assuming you're going to stick with what you had originally. I'm assuming you're taking Gonzaga. I have to take Gonzaga too. It's tough because I mean, I think Baylor can definitely win, but I mean, Gonzaga hasn't lost yet. They destroyed the whole tournament up until the UCLA game, in which they didn't play a great game. It was not like their first 4 games that they've played in the tournament. So they didn't play a great game, and they still managed to beat a UCLA team that beat Michigan. Granted, they didn't have their best player, but still they beat a 1 seed and as an 11 seed, and they had to play to get into the tournament in the first place. So I mean, that was a gritty team that they outgritted at the end there. So I have to take Gonzaga. I think this is their team. They've had a bunch of good teams before, dating very far back, all the way to I mean, early 2000s and before that as well. So I think this is the team that wins it. I think they win this game. I think it'll be close. It'll be close. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but
Yeah, I mean, before the tournament started, like you said, I predicted this matchup, and I predicted 77-72. And if you look at their scoring patterns throughout the tournament, Baylor's been around 70 points, and Gonzaga's been around 80 points, at least on average. So, I mean, I'm just that was a score I predicted, but it does seem like that's probably what it's going to be like. It's going to be a close game, and I mean, if Baylor's going to play like they played against Houston, where um, they shot 11 and 24 from three and 29 and 55 from the field. I mean, if they're going to put up numbers like that, then it's going to be tough because Gonzaga's, their defense, they haven't played great teams. Obviously, they're not in a great conference in the regular season. And then so far in the tournament, they haven't played the toughest teams. I would probably say USC was probably the toughest team they've played, but they just dominated USC. So I don't even know how much I could look into that. But I would say that if Baylor is hot from the field, or at least from three, Gonzaga is definitely going to have trouble because they could put up points. I mean, I think in the regular season, they were probably, I don't know exactly what they averaged, but it had to have been at least 80 points, maybe even close to 90 points per game. They just score a lot of points. I mean, obviously, you have Timmy, you have Suggs, you have Ayali, I think that's how you say his name. He was really good in that UCLA game also. And you have a lot of other guys who can just score points. So as long as Gonzaga can keep scoring, if Baylor's going to be hot from three, they're going to win the game. But that's really the only way I could see Baylor having this be a close game. If they could be hot from three and just make all the shots that they can, because I just don't see Gonzaga not scoring at least 70 to 80 points this game. So
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, if Baylor can shoot 50% from three, and if they can shoot, I mean, if they can just shoot lights out, they might just win the game based off that. But I mean, you could say the same thing about Gonzaga. It's just tough for me to not take Gonzaga here. I mean, I wasn't too big on them, only just because maybe it's just because of the Gonzaga's never won and they don't have like a quote unquote, the winningest culture of all time. I was a little bit skeptical, but I mean, the fact that they've gotten this far and they blew teams out, which proved that they're, just a dominant team. And they also proved they can outgrit teams. They outgritted again. I mean, they out hustled, outgritted. They wanted it, quote unquote, if they quote unquote wanted it more than UCLA. So yeah, I mean, it's tough for me not to pick Gonzaga. We agree on that. But I guess one, and this is quick, before we'll get into the mock draft after this, but I mean, does Gonzaga doing this? Does this? I guess if you look at somebody like a college like Duke, Kentucky, other colleges like that, maybe like a Kansas, if you were like all the top colleges for basketball, does this? I mean, is this a trend that the 1 year wonder type of college thing, one and done? I mean, is that at all taken a hit from this tournament? Do you look at Kentucky and say that they're just not going to be the same anymore now that? I mean, we've seen athletes, and we will see how it goes in the future years, but people might just not play for the NCAA. They might just go into the G League, or they might just take a year off, do what LaMelo did.
yeah, I mean, the only difference with this Gonzaga team is that they do have Suggs, who is going to be one and done. So unlike their other teams in the past, where they usually have guys who've been there for 2, 3, 4 years, Suggs is the exception to that, but you're right. I mean, you look in Kentucky, Duke, UNC, Kansas, other big schools in the nation, they're usually just one and done now. Maybe 10, 12 years, 10, 15 years ago they weren't, but now basically every single big college basketball team is one and done. But a Kentucky, I mean, obviously you want to win a national championship, but if you're just a one and done guy and you're going to a school like that, your main focus really isn't winning a national championship. I mean, let's be honest. You're going there because you know that you're going to be on national TV every single game. Your name's going to be out there in the media, and that you're going there because you know that you can get drafted. So to go to a school like Gonzaga, even a Baylor, and obviously there's other schools that are still really good teams, but they just don't have the high profile like a Duke, UNC, Kansas, Kentucky. So I think it definitely could change. I mean, guys, you're right. I mean, with the G League, the Ignite, I mean, you had Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga, who are both top 5 picks this year, who went there and they skipped college. Obviously, LaMelo, I mean, his situation was a little different, but still, he didn't go to college. You're most likely going to see more guys skip college, whether the NBA changes the rule to where you can get drafted out of high school, or they just take a year off, go to G League, just do overseas training. Just not college. I think that probably will be a trend. And I mean, it will be interesting to see what happens with college basketball, because in 10 years from now, like, how big is college basketball going to be if guys aren't even going to the top schools in the nation? I mean, guys like a Jalen Green or Jonathan Kuminga, they turn down like a Duke and Kentucky. So if they're turning down schools like that to go to the G League, where obviously they get paid, what does that say about college basketball's future? So that's a question they're gonna have to figure out in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, to me, yeah, it just shows that Duke and Kentucky might just be on the downtrend. I mean, Duke didn't even make the tournament this year. Yeah, I mean, used to have DeMarcus Cousins, John Wall. I mean, all these one and done players that would just go to Kentucky. And I mean, they worked with Calipari, and Calipari knew, and he said before, when he was recruiting them, that, this isn't necessarily about being the best college basketball player ever, but we're working with each other. We're helping each other out. I'll help you, and the end goal is to set you up for a successful 1 year in college and then also a successful NBA career. And if now, Jalen Green, those types of players that would have been the John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins of today, if they're just going to go to the G League, then yeah, we might just not see Duke and Kentucky be perennial 1/2 seeds anymore. And it might be, I don't view Gonzaga the same way as I view Duke and Kentucky there. If you like, I mean, Suggs is a freshman, but when you go to Gonzaga, you might go for more than 1 year. Odds are you are going to go for more than 1 year. And I know that's probably technically the same at Duke and Kentucky, but you're also going for more than just being on national TV and getting into the NBA. You're going to win and to be a Bulldog. I mean, it just means a little bit more than going to Duke and being, basically, this is just it's your one and done to the NBA. And if the G League is going to be that, then yeah, we have to get ready for a totally new college basketball scene. But yeah, we'll get into the mock draft. We're going to just do a quick, like we did, I think 2 weeks ago, last week, whatever it was. We're going to do the first half of the first round. So I go first this time. We're going to go back and forth. You go first this time. So we go back and forth on the picks. So we'll just get started. You're the first. The Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock.
Yeah. So, I mean, this pick's going to be the same as last week. No doubt it's going to be Trevor Lawrence. Nothing tells us that they're not going to go there. So, I mean, this is just a pretty easy pick. He's the best quarterback in the draft.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's the best quarterback. And I know that all the press has been about Fields, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and nobody's talked about Lawrence. That's only because everybody knows he's the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
He's still a much better prospect than Wilson, Fields, even Jones, especially Trey Lance. Number 2 was an easy pick in my mind, basically a lock, and it's even now more of a lock with the Jets trading away Sam Darnold to the Panthers for 2021 6th and 2022 2nd and 4th.
Yep.
It's Wilson. Wilson's their guy. As far as pure arm talent's concerned, I think many would say he's probably number 2 out of the quarterbacks, if not number 1. So yeah, he's the Jets guy. I don't know that I like the pick, and I think somebody like Wilson may need more structure and more of a winning culture to, I think it might be similar to what happened to Sam Darnold. If it's a guy who's not, NFL ready and winning culture ready, then he might just kind of flop in New York. I'm not too sure. We'll have to see. But yeah, I think Wilson's the easy pick there.
Yeah, I mean, something I saw, I forget where I saw it, or who said it, but they said the Jets and the Dolphins were doing similar things in that they both had Gase, they both fired him, got defensive coaches, new front office, went with a new style, a new kind of style to their front office and getting players. And obviously, the Dolphins drafted Tua last year, and it obviously now the Jets are going to draft Zach Wilson. That's now official, obviously with the trade of Darnold. So if both those situations work out, obviously the Dolphins has worked out. The quarterback is still the question, but the rest of the team is looking pretty good. So if the Jets can work on the other pieces first, and then the quarterback obviously will happen for this year. But if you can work on your other pieces and elevate them, then your quarterback is going to be better no matter what. Even if he is bad, if your other pieces are better, the quarterback is going to look better and your team is going to win games. And then the hope is that the quarterback that you draft second overall actually is going to be a top 10, top 5 quarterback one day. But I think trading Darnold, I mean, some people were saying that, they couldn't get a first round pick for him. I don't think you were going to get a first round pick for him. He's still 23, but he just hasn't shown anything, whether it's his fault or the organization's fault, which I think you can blame the organization for that. But still, he hasn't shown much anyways. So getting a second round pick, a fourth round pick next year, and a sixth round pick this year, I don't think that's terrible. I think that's good. I think it works out for both sides. And when we get to the Panthers, we could talk about their situation. But I think that the Jets making this trade, and obviously having Joe Douglas, having Robert Saleh come in, I think they're moving in the right direction, kind of like the Dolphins were 2 years ago, obviously, when they hired Flores. They got rid of, they both traded really good safeties, one Micah Fitzpatrick, one Jamal Adams. They draft the quarterback, they build the other pieces up. So I think it was the right move to do. And yeah, you're right. Zach Wilson, it's official. He's going to be drafted second overall.
Yeah, I think as far as the compensation is concerned, yeah, I think you got basically as much as you could get. I think the only team that might have been able to give more or was willing to give more is probably the Pats in your own division, and you're not going to trade Darnold in the division, even if the Jets don't believe in him 100%. I mean, you don't trade a quarterback with at least a little bit of potential in the division. It just wouldn't make sense unless, again, you just were completely out on him. But I don't even think the Jets were necessarily that. I just think they wanted the full rookie contract again and a fresh restart. And I think they knew that Darnold would be better probably somewhere else. So yeah, we'll see on Wilson, but yeah, you're on the clock for 3.
Yeah, so the Niners pick, obviously with them moving up, last week we had them taking Fields. I'm going to stick with that. I think there's no reason not to move up to the third pick if you're not going to take a quarterback. So obviously with Lawrence and then Wilson, Fields is going to be the next guy available. I'm not sure how much I love Fields, but he's the top quarterback who's going to be there at number 3. So clearly they like him. They knew that he was going to be there at 3. So again, I'm not sure how much I like him, but I mean, he's the guy there, so you have to take him.
I mean, the rumor is that they're taking Jones, and I don't. If you're giving me the chance of, if you're trading up to 3, right? I want Fields or I guess Lance, but Fields really, because he's probably the third or second best quarterback in the draft, and he's the guy you would get if you're trading up to 3. I know, if you like Jones and you're in love with Jones, if Shanahan's in love with Mac Jones, you trade up to 3, theoretically speaking, to assure the fact that you get him. But I honestly think you could have got Mac Jones at probably 6. He's going to go at 6 probably at the earliest, I would assume. He just wouldn't go at 3. So, as far as that's concerned, I don't think you had to trade up to 3 to get Jones. But I honestly, I mean, I don't know. You can debate how a mock draft should be done, whether we're picking on who we think they will pick or who we think they should pick. I mean, what's your thoughts on Mac Jones versus the field of other quarterbacks available?
Well, I would definitely say Fields is, even though I'm not sure how much I like him, he's definitely the third best quarterback. I mean, he played in the Big Ten and showed he has the skills and the talent to be a top, at least a pretty good quarterback in the NFL. But Lance, obviously from North Dakota State, you don't exactly know. Obviously, the competition he's playing isn't great, and he showed flashes, but nothing amazing, I would say. And then Mac Jones, obviously played in the SEC, but it's almost like Tua, where I think obviously Tua is more talented, but you're the quarterback of Alabama, so you're most likely going to be better than you really are, just because you have a you basically have an NFL offensive line and NFL skill players all around you. So I would definitely be lower on Mac Jones. But yeah, I think Justin Fields. I mean, if they're going to take Mac Jones, I think that's a little crazy. No matter how much you like him, because you're right, you could easily get him probably past 10 if you really wanted to. So if they're moving up to 3, I feel like you almost have to take Justin Fields.
Yeah. The only reason that you would trade up to 3 and have to trade up to 3 is if you're super scared that before the Donald trade, a Carolina, a New England would trade up to past you to get him. But I don't see it. I don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think if they pick Jones at 3, even if it's a good pick, I'll still say you didn't have to give up
Yeah.
as much as you did to get to 3. Uh,
It would be similar to the Bears moving up to get Trubisky. I know they only moved up one spot, which was still ridiculous because they actually traded with the Niners, who weren't going to take a quarterback at that point. But you easily could have got Trubisky later in that first round. I don't know how much later, but at least a couple picks later. So, or just taking him at the number 3 spot, obviously. But it would be somewhat similar to where you could have waited on that guy. So if they're moving up like this, especially when they were at 12, then moving up to 3, you almost have to take Fields.
yeah. 4 Falcons on the clock. To me, there's 2 positions I guess 2 players I kind of look at. I look at Lance and I look at Pitts and I say, do the Falcons want their next plan? I'm not too sure. I mean, I think they're at least invested in Ryan for at least this year, probably the year after that. So if you're drafting Lance, you're probably sitting him for, again, at least 1 year. Um, Matt Ryan's only 35, I want to say 36. So he's not like that old. And I know people say, wow, look at how insanely old Brady's getting and still able to play this well. I think that's going to be the trend as we go forward. I think players like a Ryan, maybe a Stafford, but Stafford's been pretty injury prone, but a player like Ryan, pocket passers, they're going to probably be, again, given the fact that they have a good offensive line or at least solid, they're going to be able to play probably until they're 40, like Favre did, like other quarterbacks have before. Drew Brees did as well. I don't know that I like Lance is what I'm saying. Um, I'm not too sure on him as a prospect. Again, he didn't even play last year. The year before that, he threw like 27 touchdowns, no picks. Well, he technically played 1 game last year, but I'm going to go with Pitts. I think he's the best player on the board. I think he's better than any of the receivers. And I think tight end might be the most slept on position in the NFL. There's not too many elite tight ends, but when you look at Kittle, Kelsey, and I'm about ready to throw Darren Waller in that as well. I think those 3 tight ends, you could argue, are just as valuable as any receiver in the league. It's a debate. I mean, it's a debate on the Chiefs who's more valuable, Kelsey or Hill. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, which just shows that tight end is a super undervalued position and probably underpaid at this point. Maybe not Kelsey and Kittle, but the rest of the tight ends in the league potentially. I think Pitts is the best player here. I'm taking Pitts. That's my answer.
Yeah, I would probably take Pitts also. And we're not doing trades, but I would probably expect the Falcons honestly to move down in the draft unless they just are in love with Pitts, which I wouldn't be shocked because you're right. Not counting quarterbacks, he is the best player on the board. They do need a tight end. Obviously, they have Hayden Hurst. They did lose Austin Hooper last year, but getting a guy like Pitts with Julio and Calvin Ridley, that's a pretty stacked offense. And still, Matt Ryan, he's had some pretty good years the last couple of years. It just, their defense is just so bad that it's hard for them to win games. But
Physical
yeah,
attribute wise, like physically, Matt Ryan, I don't think has declined since his MVP season. I'm not
yeah,
saying he's going to be an MVP at all, but he can be a B plus, A minus quarterback
yeah, for
easily.
sure. No, for sure. He could definitely be top 10, obviously more towards 10, but he probably is still top 10 quarterback, and he could play like a top 8 quarterback if he really, has the protection, and obviously if a guy like Pitts, then you have 3 amazing weapons. But for number 5 for the Bengals, I'd go, if assuming Pitts is off the board, I'd probably go Panay Sewell. I know they're saying they may try to go receiver here. I just wouldn't. I'd probably stay off that. I'd try to build the offensive line. Sewell's the best offensive lineman in this draft, and he can play left. He can go right in at left tackle for you. Joe Burrow obviously needs offensive line help. That's the reason he got injured last year. So I think they have to learn from that mistake, take the offensive lineman. He's going to be great for probably 10 to 15 years. And obviously, you're hoping to have Burrow for 10 to 15 years, maybe even more than that, who knows. But to get a guy like that at left tackle early with a quarterback, that's huge. And I think that's something that they definitely need to do. So if they go wide receiver, I wouldn't say I hate it, but I just wouldn't love it. I would love if they go Sewell, but I just think that's a great pick for them.
To me, this is a position I could see the Bengals trading out of too, as much as I don't know that they're going to, but I think they could. I think Sewell's great, but I also think you could, again, I'm not an offensive tackle expert, but assuming this draft is deep on tackles, which it is reportedly at least, and if it is, then I would not mind drafting a tackle in the second round. They already have one tackle. They really only need one more. Draft a tackle in the second or third. Maybe you could trade up into the late first if you really want to, but this draft seems deep for tackles. I would either trade out or I would draft whoever you want, like maybe a Jamar Chase, like somebody who really has a really elite ceiling. 6, the Dolphins. I don't like them trading. I like them trading down to 12. I don't necessarily love them trading up to 6 unless they really love a guy. I don't want to go receiver here. I don't. I think they could use a receiver. I don't know that they necessarily need one. If they really wanted a receiver, I would not have minded just sitting at 12, and you get either Waddle or Smith probably at 12. So I wouldn't have minded that, but at 6, this is going to be surprising, but I'm going to do it. I mean, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Trey Lance. And
surprising, yeah.
If Fields was here, I would be more willing to go with Fields, but I'll go with Lance. I'm not sold on Tua being the guy. I mean, I was a relatively big Tua guy. I wasn't a Tua hater or anything coming out of the draft. I thought he was going to be the guy. He hasn't really proven it. And it's not that he hasn't proven that he's not, but he hasn't proven that he is it. I don't love a Jamar Chase pick here. If Pitts was here, I'd be tempted to take Pitts. I don't love Jamar Chase at 6. I think you get more value with him maybe around that 10 range. I don't think he's going to fall there, but yeah, it would really be unfortunate to see the Dolphins draft Chase here, and then you would see Tua is not the guy. And this Dolphins team isn't going to be below probably 7-10. I don't think they're going to be a competitive team. They'll probably be around 500 for at least the next few years. They just have a roster, and Flores seems like he's at least a semi-competent coach, although I know there's been a bit of a rumble there with the locker room as of recently because they cut I think all their captains this year, but they're going to be a solid team. They're not going to have the 3rd or 6th pick in the draft, I don't think. So if Tua is not the guy and you don't draft a quarterback, you're going to have to probably trade up to find a guy or get lucky later in the draft. I'm going to go with Lance. That way you have 2 guys, whichever one works out. The other one probably hasn't depleted their stock, and you could probably still get something for them like the Jets did with Darnold, probably even more, especially if Tua works out. Let's say you draft Lance, he backs Tua up. You're not expecting Lance to start day 1 anyways. So if Tua starts this year and he plays well, he leads them to the playoffs, and you now know Tua's the guy, you can trade Lance for probably about where you picked him. You could probably trade him, especially given next year's quarterback draft class is just not nearly as highly touted as this year's. You could probably trade Lance for the 6th pick of next year's draft. So I honestly, the more I talk about it, the more I sell myself on the Dolphins picking a quarterback here.
No, I'd be surprised if they were to take a quarterback here. If they were still at 3, I would not be surprised because obviously you're in that top 3. But them moving out, and I know they moved to 6, but they moved out of that top 3. I feel like that kind of said we're sold on Tua at least for this year. Like we're at least going to be this year, and then depending on how he plays next year. But obviously for this year, I think they're sold on him. And obviously they didn't bring Fitzpatrick back. They didn't really bring in a backup. So I think Tua is the guy for this year. And I agree. If Pitts could follow them at 6, I'd 100% take Pitts. That'd be the perfect pick for them. I think he'd be great. But I don't see him getting to 6. But again, if he does take him, I'd go Jamar Chase. I think you need that number 1 wide receiver, and Jamar Chase is that guy. It would be great for Tua to have a guy like that. I know they have Devontae Parker and their tight end Gesicki, who's pretty good, and him with Pitts would actually be really good at 2 tight end set like that. But to have Chase, Parker, Gesicki, a couple of
Will Fuller as well.
Yeah, he's on a 1-year contract, suspended for the first game, but still a guy who can stretch the field like that. Again, I'm not sold on Tua. I was never sold on him out of the draft. I was more Herbert than Tua, but I think for this team, for the team where they're going, and if you take Chase, I just think that's a huge weapon for someone. And you kind of forget he had that hip surgery in 2019. I don't know if he was fully recovered from that in 2020. So this will be a huge year because if he shows some flashes, and I know he wasn't running, obviously they fired Chan Gailey, their offensive coordinator, got a new one in there. So if he can run a little bit more and just be more active and mobile, and obviously his arm's gonna have to be better, and look more like the 2019, 2018 Tua from Alabama, then you know that you made the right pick at that point. No matter, I mean, maybe Herbert could be better, but you know at least it's a good pick, not a bad pick. And getting a guy like Chase would just be huge for them on the outside. But for number 7, the Lions, this is kind of a tough pick. There's a couple other different ways you can go with this, but I'd probably go Micah Parsons here. He's probably the best linebacker in the draft, and he has the character issues that he's had at Penn State, but the talent, there's no question that he's the most talented. I guess he's probably the most talented defensive player in this draft. I mean, everyone that we've talked about has been offense so far, so if he can just stay straight, and I don't know about going to Detroit is exactly the right place to go for him, but he would be a great linebacker for them. Obviously, they have Dan Campbell as their new head coach. He's kind of like a fiery guy. It's the whole point of him. I think you bring a new culture in there. We'll see how the golf turns out, but obviously you're going to stick with him for at least this year. But getting Parsons in there, I think would be a really good pick. And based on everywhere else on the board, I just think that's a really good pick for them at 7.
To me, if Chase falls to 7, this could be a place where you potentially go with Chase at 7. I don't think they're like, I mean, you lost Galladay, obviously, you lost Marvin Jones as well. Yeah. You could totally use a guy like Chase. I don't hate Parsons there. I don't, to me, I think if you're going to draft Parsons, and we're not doing trades, but again, I think Parsons gets more value around 10, 11, 12, more so than 7. I think Chase is a guy that if you get him at 7, that's further than he was expected to fall. So I like the value there. And I know you don't just draft off of value, but I mean, I don't care. Number 8, the Panthers. This is tough. I mean, so they're not going to draft a quarterback. I would assume if they were, they'd have to draft Jones in this draft. So I don't love that at 8. This is where I go with Jamar Chase, best receiver. I think if he falls to 8, that's beautiful for Carolina. So,
yeah, I mean, if he could fall to 8, again, I would have him go into the Dolphins. But if he falls to 8, I would definitely take him. If he's not on the board, I'd probably take Rashawn Slater. I mean, obviously, you just got Darnold, who you'd hope would be your quarterback of the future. So get an offensive tackle like that, where they've kind of lost pieces on their offensive line in the last couple of years. So to get a guy like Slater, the second best tackle in this draft, I think would be a good pick too. But if Chase is there, I would definitely take Chase. So number 9 for the Broncos, this pick, I think you went Surtain in our last mock draft, which I could definitely see it doing. But you're right. I mean, they have Darby for 3 years and Fuller for 1 year. So we'll see what happens with Fuller at the end of this season. I would assume he wouldn't resign, but so I wouldn't be surprised if they went corner, but I'd probably go Rashawn Slater here. I just think always getting offensive line could always help. And obviously Drew Lock is most likely not going to be the quarterback of the future. So I think for next year, you look for that quarterback, even though you're right, it's not a great class for quarterbacks next year. I think you have to get your quarterback next year. If you could keep building up the offensive line, you obviously have Garrett Bowles on one tackle. You could have Slater at the other. And you have a couple pieces on their inner offensive line. So to keep building up that offensive line, they have good weapons on the outside. So I think they look for their quarterback next year and keep building up the trenches this year. And their defense it's pretty solid. I mean, again, you have to look at Fuller and how Darby can actually play with the contract, but you have Simmons, you have Bradley Chubb, obviously. So I think getting offensive line help would be huge.
Yeah, I don't hate the pick. I think Slater 9 is about sounds right for Slater. So I don't hate it. 10, the Cowboys. I mean, you wanted to draft Surtain last draft. I'll do it this draft. I think he's the safest cornerback to take. I think Caleb Farley might have a higher ceiling, but with the back surgery, I don't think he didn't play last year. So it's a riskier pick. And I think Farley's a guy that he might be the best cornerback in the draft, but he's so risky and he might fall down he might even fall to somewhere around 20. So, and I think Surtain's probably going to be picked around 10. It's the guy that I think has been linked to the Cowboys the most as well, just in general. I'll take Surtain. I think he's probably a safe pick. I think he's going to be a great player. I don't know that he's going to be an elite cornerback, but he'll be pretty darn good. I'll take Surtain.
Yeah, that's a pick I would take too. I think he's the perfect pick for Cowboys at 10. Next is the Giants. So I mean, they're most likely going receiver here. I'd be surprised if they don't go receiver. And with Chase being off the board, it's down to Waddle or Smith. So I mean, I like Waddle better than Smith. So even though I wish the Giants would take the worst of the two receivers, however their careers panned out, obviously, but for the mock draft, I think they take Waddle. I just think he's the better receiver. And I know the weight people, with Smith, he's only 170. And I know people have been saying that you shouldn't worry about that. I think it is something to worry about. Only being 170 pounds, it's, I know there's guys who are little and don't weigh a lot, but to be a true number one receiver, a guy who could really be a true playmaker, to be 170 pounds, that's just tough to be in the NFL. And I know in college or in the SECs, you're basically playing NFL type players, but it's a different level when you get to the NFL. So I think Waddle is just the safer pick. And obviously I know he had the broken ankle last year, but I think I'm not too concerned about that. It's not a back issue. It's not something that can keep happening in the long term. I think it was just a one-time incident that happened with his ankle. So I think the better pick is Waddle, but either wide receiver I think is a pretty good pick here, but I think Waddle's the better one.
Yeah, I think Waddle probably is the better receiver than Smith. I think Smith is riskier. Smith may be better. I'm not exactly too sure, but I mean, Smith won that Heisman because Chase wasn't even there. He didn't play last season, and Waddle got hurt. Waddle was arguably having a better season before he got hurt. So yeah, at 12, I mean, I don't want to draft another receiver if I'm the Eagles, but I mean, he's probably the best player available anyways. So I mean, I don't want to do it because I kind of want Smith to fall to the Patriots at 15. But I mean, this is just a mock draft, so it doesn't actually affect them in real life. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Devontae Smith for the Eagles. I think he's gonna be. I mean, those top three receivers to me, at least in my mind, I find it hard to believe that one of those guys will bust. Maybe one of them will, maybe Smith, but I don't think so. I mean, he won the Heisman. He's so electric. He's insane. If he does, as long as he's not, 160 pounds going into the first game of the regular season, I think he'll be fine. I don't think the weight's something to be concerned about, really. So I'll go with Smith, and I think the Eagles finally actually hit on a receiver. I mean, they've had so many misses. I think Rager's probably a miss at this point. I mean, even if he works out, he's at least a miss compared to Jefferson. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that pick too. 13 Chargers. I think they have a big need at cornerback. I mean, if you look at their secondary, their best player is Chris Harris, and he's not in his prime like he was with the Broncos in 2015. So he obviously lost. What was his name? The guy who went to the Titans. Desmond King. You lost him. You traded him earlier this year. So I think corners are a big problem for them. So if Surtain's going to be off the board at 10, I think Farley is probably the pick here. You could go J.C. Horn also. I do think Farley has the bigger upside, but obviously with that back injury, you just never know. But I'm going off upside for them. I think Farley's just a really good fit for them. So you have to see how he is with the back. You have to look at the medicals and hope that he is going to be okay. I think they did say that he should be good by training camp. So he'll probably, by the time the season starts, assuming no setbacks, he'll probably be 100%. But if everything checks out medically, and you do know and you like him as a player, obviously, I think Caleb Farley is a great pick at 13 for the Chargers.
Yeah, my only concern is really the injury, but other than that, he's just raw cornerback talent. He's probably number one in this draft. I mean, at 14 for the Vikings, it's perfect, almost perfect for them. I'll take Elijah Vera Tucker. They probably need offensive line help. That's probably their biggest need, if not one of their biggest needs. And I think Tucker falling to 14, again, that's probably around where you'd think he would be. He might even go earlier. He probably will go earlier than 14. So to get him at 14, you can kind of play him wherever on the line too. You're not going to play him at center, but he can play guard. He can play tackle. He's done both. I'm perfectly fine with the Vikings taking Tucker here at 14.
Yeah. For 15 for the Patriots, obviously your favorite team. Did you already take Lance? Is he off the board?
Lance, the only quarterback on the board is Mac Jones. Well, out of the ones that would probably go in the
Mac
top
Jones?
16.
Yeah. See, I mean, I'm kind of stuck if I would go Jones to see, obviously this year he wouldn't start with Cam, you assume, unless Cam plays really bad. But
I think if you draft Jones, he can start day one. I don't I
I think he could.
He could easily
Um,
beat out Cam Newton. Like, I hate to say it, but Cam Newton, I mean, I know last year was a COVID year and all that, but I've seen enough of Cam Newton to know that he can definitely be beaten out by Jones. And I don't love Jones, but
yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna go Jones. I'd probably like to go with a different position, but I think I'm just gonna go with Jones, just for the reason that he could possibly turn out to be someone for them. Obviously, Cam's not going to be the answer. No one that you have right now is the answer. So I think if they like Jones enough, I think you could take him at 16, and hope that he could turn out to be just a pretty good quarterback. Obviously, you'd hope they could be a really, but I just don't think he's going to ever reach that. Maybe in a perfect system, but I think you could. If there's no wide receiver, I definitely take a wide receiver if there's one there, the top three. But assuming there's not, I would probably take Mac Jones.
yeah, I think it's Mac Jones is you'd assume he'd probably go somewhere around 15. If he were to slip past 15, that's when you'd start seeing teams call other teams and try to trade up. So I don't see him falling past I don't see him falling past probably 15 or 16. And he might even go 3 to the 49ers. So I don't think it's a horrible pick. Yeah, I think Smith or Waddle, probably Smith, though, is your best like player on the board type of pick compared to Jones. I think that's more like value at 15, probably. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate the Jones pick. If he's the guy and Belichick loves him, he's the guy. And he, as far as his pro day and his physical attributes are concerned, he's proven that he's not just going to be, or he doesn't have potential to be a mobile guy. He can be mobile. He has Mahomes speed. I think he ran a 4.8 or something at the 40 for the 40-yard dash, and that might be slightly inflated because there's no combine. But yeah, I think he can be more than like a stand in the pocket type of passer, which is good for obviously for current NFL days. But 16, the Cardinals, there's a few ways they could go, but with losing Peterson, Kirkpatrick, Jonathan Joseph, both free agents right now, you'd look to go cornerback. And really, I mean, I'm gonna take Horn out of South Carolina. I think it's similar to the wide receivers. You have Farley, Surtain, and Horn. I think those are the top three corners, just like Waddle, Smith, and Chase are the top three receivers. I think Surtain will probably go first, just like Chase will probably go first. But I think all three of them are all three great picks at anywhere between 5 and or probably like 10 and 16. All three of those guys probably going between there. So whichever one you get as the Cardinals, I like. Most likely it'll be Horn at 16, maybe Farley. I like the pick. So yeah, I'll go with Horn. Hopefully he replaces Peterson. He probably won't be, a 10-time straight Pro Bowl or whatever it was, what Peterson was. But if you can get a solid number one corner who can go head to head against Metcalf, Lockett, I mean, all these the guys in Los Angeles, the guys in San Francisco. I mean, if you can get Horn to be your number one corner, I mean, you need that. You need that as the Cardinals. So I'll go with Horn at 16.
Yeah, no, I really like that pick. I think one of those three corners is going to be there. It's probably going to be Horn unless the injury concerns for Farley are just really bad. So maybe he falls down to them, but it's probably going to be Horn there. And for Mac Jones, he did run a unofficial 4.79. So yeah, basically like a Mahomes type of athlete and speed, everything like that.
Yeah, I don't love Mac Jones, but honestly, it's just, I mean, I what do I know? If Belichick likes him, then I like him, to be honest. And Belichick has not been a great drafter, and I've definitely been earlier on this than the national media has, just because I'm a fan of the team. I know that 100%. I know that. But again, if the head coach likes him and he's sold Kraft and he's sold the team on him being the number one guy, and Belichick scout guys love him, if Saban loves Mac Jones compared to Tua, I mean, hey, getting your guy at 15, it's huge, obviously. So
Yeah.
yeah, but that was the mock draft. That's the episode. Appreciate everybody who stayed to the end. Um, yeah. So we'll be back. I mean, any last words before we?
I guess this time next week we'll each do our own draft. So instead of just going back and forth on picks, we'll each do our own 16 first picks. So that'll be our last mock draft before the actual NFL draft happens. So I guess just look out for that next week.
Yeah, but appreciate everybody who stayed to the end. Stuff in the description, bunch of stuff. Feel free to sub, like, notification bell, all that type of stuff. We'll be back Thursday night, Friday at noon ish. So stay tuned.